As promised, we are continuing the checklist for every single phase of Warhammer 40,000. So if you missed episode 1, where I gave the whole breakdown and everything, it's going to be linked here-ish or down in the description, something like that. So you can go check that out. That's where we went through all of the pre-game questions you need to be asking and all of the deployment phase questions you need to be asking to make sure that you succeed as much as possible in Warhammer 40,000. Because contrary to what everyone will tell you, contrary to what everyone believes, Warhammer 40,000 is a game of decisions and skill. Yes, sometimes certain armies are a little bit stronger than others. Yes, dice do play factors, but this is a game that you win based off of skill. This is why the best players always win, because they have the most skill and they always win, regardless of what army they're bringing to the big tournaments. If you find yourself in a rut where you are just not winning or you're just feeling really bad about how certain games are turning out, it's because of decisions. Like almost 1,000% of the time. Maybe one game was because of dice or one game was because of matchup, but the games in general that you're always experiencing is always because of decisions. So let's go through the checklist for the turn or command phase. Start the turn / start the command phase. And then I'm going to do the movement phase and the shooting phase today. So we're breaking all of that down right now. Let's check in. All right, so turn, command phase. So the top of the turn, you have to do a couple things. You got to ask yourself 4 things, and where you got to ask yourself 3 things, then you got to do one extra thing. I do this at the start of every single turn. I pause for 2 minutes and I plan my entire turn. And this is how I have like 5-minute movement phases. My shooting phases are really fast. I never clock out. I am a very fast player because I identify everything I need to accomplish first, and then I just go to accomplish that. So here we go. What do I need to do this turn? Very simple. And what you need to do is not always what you want to do, right? And that's the big thing. So then the second question you ask yourself is, what would I like to do this turn? The third thing would be, what can I do to set myself up for next turn? And then the fourth thing you need to make sure that you're doing every single turn is, while you are playing the turn, you need to be speaking your intent. You need to be saying, hey, as I'm moving my models into this position, or I'm deep striking here, I want to ensure that I am out of line of sight of that unit which can overwatch, so that your opponent helps you guarantee that all of your angles are correct and then you're never going to hit by gotchas. But let me break this down a little bit. What do I need to do this turn? This can be a unit that has to be dealt with this turn. And remember, you can deal with units by destroying them, but you can also deal with units by just engaging them or by move blocking them. It doesn't mean you need to kill that unit. It just means it's a unit that might need to be dealt with. Maybe what you have to accomplish this turn is you have to stop your opponent from scoring recover assets, or you need to stop your opponent from holding defend strongholds, so that you can stick them with that secondary. Or maybe you just need to deny them primary and you don't actually need to accomplish anything else because it's turn 2 and you've got a lot of time to catch up. Maybe it can be just tons of things. Maybe it's just scoring your secondaries. It doesn't matter. But then after first thing that you identify is what you have to accomplish. And then everything that you're going to do this turn is to guarantee that you accomplish that. Once you know you've accomplished said goal, the other things can be accomplishing things that you want to do. So my primary objective for turn 1, if I have, like, say, infiltrators deployed forward, might be, hey, I went first, so my main thing I need to do is guarantee I move block my opponent. So I will guarantee I do that first before I try to do anything else. My secondary thing is, maybe I need to get my one unit in the middle of the board so that I can score area denial. Maybe that's what I need to do. And then I need to get another unit that needs to be positioned on my natural expansion so they can safely hold my objective. But when you prioritize what you have to do, what you want to do, what you need to do to set yourself up for next turn, that's going to make your turns go so much faster. You're going to stop thinking about things that don't matter, right? Because one of the things I see people do all the time is they and her over decisions that just don't matter. And they waste 20-30 minutes sometimes on just thinking about things that don't matter to the state of the game. So identify those 3 things. It's going to help you a bunch. Let's get into the questionnaire for the command phase. All right. First thing you do, look at the secondaries. What are your secondaries? They're going to tell you what to do. Do you need secure no man's land and extend battle lines? Okay, you need to have 2 units on units that are in no man's land, and you need 1 on, I guess, well, done. It's done, right? It's done. Do you need area denial? So do you have to stand within 3 of the center? Because if you do, well, luckily that stacks with secure no man's land. Do you have established locus, but you don't want to do it because that would expose a unit for just 2 victory points? Then maybe you don't need to score established locus, right? These are the things that you need to ask yourself. So just right off the bat, at the start of your command phase, always draw your cards. Don't think about anything else. Then you're going to ask yourself, do I need to Do I need to activate my tactical doctrine? I guess Blessings of Corn is actually pre-battle round, so I'm going to delete that, and let's just put that, or I'm not going to delete it here. We're just going to say pre-battle round stuff can go, earlier. right before command phase. So we'll say pre-battle round, just like that. But you want to ask yourself the things that have to be done in the command phase. Do you have a stratagem that can auto pass battle shock? You need to ask yourself these questions. Do the things that have to be done in the command phase, plan them first. You just ask yourself the question, what has to be done in the command phase? Then you go, are there any like I said, any strats that need to be determined in this phase? Do you have a strat to put your units on the wall if you're playing Daka? Do you have the strats to put yourself in a different doctrine if you're playing Space Marines? Extra OC, right? Depending on different detachments. These are things that you have to ask yourself. Then you go, how much command points does my opponent have? And how many command points do I have? Because that is going to help you out tremendously. When you know how much command points you have, you know what you need to dedicate towards your primary, secondary, and tertiary objectives. Your primary meaning, what do I need to do this turn? Your secondary meaning, what would I like to do this turn? And your third doing, what can I do to set myself up for next turn, right? So if you only have 2 CP and you know you have to make a 5-inch charge, one of those CP in your brain you want to consider already spent on a command point reroll. Because if you fail the 5-inch charge that you're going to have, then maybe the game's over and you just lose. So you, in your brain, already go ahead and say, no matter what, one of the 2 CP I have is already dedicated towards that command point reroll. So I only have 1 CP. So you identify that right now. And then you go, if my opponent has 2 CP and you need to charge multiple units, you might actually want to think to yourself, okay, he has a combat interrupt, and that's a big problem for me because I'm going to charge a lot this turn, and I really don't want him to come command point interrupt. How can I potentially get him to use an Overwatch to screw himself over so that he can no longer command point interrupt? Or if he only has 2 CP and you happen to have something with a Vect Aura, how can I get that unit he wants to use command point interrupt on within my Vect Aura? So I think it's like the Aura of Madness, or I forget what it's called in 10th edition. It's the thing that 12-inch aura of certain units that make your command points cost an extra command point or for your enemy. How can I get my unit within 12 inches of his unit he wants to use command point interrupt on, and that would make it cost 3, and now he can't use that stratagem because he only has 2 command points. So you look at your opponent's command points, you look at your command points, you plan the spending of your command points in your command phase. If you have to destroy a unit in shooting, you know that you're going to need your command points to give yourself sustained hits for whatever detachment, whatever army you're playing. Okay, pre-spend that in your command phase in your brain. You can even write it down on a piece of paper. So that way you always know where the command points are. You're never surprised that you don't have command points for something. You're never like, oh, darn it, if only I had command points for this, because you've already pre-dedicated it, okay? And then the last thing that you're going to do is you look at regen models. Do you have models that can regenerate, that can deny that can actually get you a objective that you weren't going to be getting? This applies to things like Gene Stealer Cults. This applies to things like Necrons. So keep this stuff going in your head. These are the questions you need to ask yourself for the command phase. Now let's look at the movement phase. All right, Gretchen. Start of the movement phase strats, stuff like this, whatever. Anything that has an ability that operates at the start of the movement phase, you just ask yourself, do I have anything that has to be done at the start of the movement phase? If the answer is yes, do it. Then you ask yourself this question: where do I need to be on the board? And do I actually need to be there on the board? Now, this is a really important one because a lot of people will say, well, I have to get a unit on this objective. But then you need to ask yourself the question, do you have to get a unit on the objective? Because if it's turn 1, I promise you a big mistake a lot of people make is by thinking that they have to have a unit on their natural expansion in turn 1 so that they can start scoring primary in turn 2. Guys, I very often just say, screw it, I don't need to score primary in turn 2. And that's okay, because I'm going to score all of my primary in turns 3, 4, 5. But if I expose a unit early and I lose this unit before I'm ready to lose it, will that negatively impact my game? So when you're identifying if you need to have a unit in a certain position, ask yourself, does it actually need to be there, okay? Then you're going to examine the board and you're going to see what objectives are safe and if you need to take more than the safe ones. So most boards will have a natural expansion. And this is a terminology we use from like RTSs like StarCraft and things like this. This is where you can stage your models or you can hold an objective behind cover safely so your opponent can't really shoot you from it. So we just refer to that as the natural expansion. And in a lot of missions, you can only max score 10 primary anyway. So let's say that it is Scorched Earth where you can only score 10 primary. Well, you already have your home field. Now you have your natural expansion. Is there any point in putting anything in the center? Then don't, because that's just needlessly exposing units that you don't need to hold. If it's Purge the Foe, you score 4 points for holding one objective, and you score 8 points for holding more than your opponent. Well, if your opponent's only holding 1 or 2 objectives, then you only need to hold 1 or 2 objectives, because you just don't want to give them hold more, right? but there's no point in you holding like 3 of them, not unless you have a ton of expendable units that you want your opponent to expose themselves to kill. So these are questions I want you asking yourself. Then you go, how do we stage to lock up the objectives? Is there a safe place where I can put my model and deny his objective? Is there a safe place I can put my models to encourage him to not want to touch his own objectives, because that's going to be an easy charge for me? So you can actually threaten your opponent's objectives without exposing yourself. And that's going to be an entire video where I can show you how to like position that. Actually, that might be a workshop that we need to do. Then we look at measuring your potential charge ranges or your shooting angles. You should never be surprised by how far a charge is, or that you won't be able to get line of sight for your shooting before you start moving. So what I mean by this is, if you have a unit in your a unit on the table and you want to send them out and you want to charge your opponent's models that's 12 inches away, well, in the movement phase, at the start of the movement phase, you should measure and be like, oh, you're 12 inches away from me. That means I have a 6-inch movement. That means I will have a 6-inch charge. You should never find out what the charge distance is in the charge phase. You should know it at the start of the movement phase. Because or even command phase, really. Because if you are surprised with a 6-inch charge, which is a 6-inch charge in the command phase when you thought it was going to be a 2-inch charge, well, maybe you really needed to save a command point for that. So I need you to guarantee at the start of your movement phase that you have identified what units you're charging, what units you're shooting, so that you know exactly how far you need to move. Do I need to use the stratagem to allow advance and shoot on this unit? Things like this. All right. Then you, once again, we're going to just check, does your opponent have the CP? Do they have the CP to do an Overwatch? Do they have the CP to do a rapid ingress? Because if they do, you need to make sure that you move to screen out those rapid ingresses, or you're cautious about your opponent doing an Overwatch. And sometimes, like we had talked about in the last slide, it might actually be beneficial for you if they Overwatch you, because then they won't have the command points to, say, to a combat interrupt. So this is like the machinations that need to be going on in your heads. Then you ask the question, do you have turn 1 deep strikes? Do you have access to 6-inch, 3-inch deep strikes, things like this? So I always ask this question to my opponent. Some people think that you need to ask this in the deployment phase. It's probably not a bad idea, but I always make sure I do it in the movement phase just to remind myself. And if my opponent goes, oh yeah, remember I have Inceptors, okay, cool. So that changes the way I'm going to move, because I know he's got a 6-inch deep strike. So I'm going to have to screen him a little bit differently to make sure he can't shoot my, little squishly bits, right? And then you ask, do you have bonuses to charge out of reserves? Because sometimes people can get +2, +3 to charging out of reserves. Like Haldor Drago, for example, he can come down and be at +3 to charge. That's pretty important to know, because if you're willing to accept the fact that your opponent can get a 9-inch deep strike charge, maybe you're not willing to accept that if your opponent gets +3 to that charge. So maybe you need to screen him even further by putting models in the way. And if you're not familiar with how screening works, I've done videos on it, and I'll do more in the future, but you can also hop in the upcoming workshops I'm going to be hosting on this. And then I go, where is the likely Overwatch and what is the mission rule? This is also finally a really, really important one, right? What is the likely Overwatch? If he has a very, very likely Overwatch and that I really want to avoid, but I can't avoid it, just say like, no matter what, this infantry squad has to go in the center and I really don't want his flamer unit to Overwatch them, I will actually move other units within range of Overwatches first, hoping that my opponent might Overwatch a different unit, make that wrong decision, and then put the unit that I didn't want to get Overwatch afterwards. So you can ask yourself, where's the likely Overwatch and how can I potentially bait out that Overwatch? And what is the mission rule? Meaning, if I have to do containment, well, is this swift action? Can I do advances and actions with battle line units? These are important things. So ask these questions in the movement phase. It's going to help you much. I'm going to do one more today. And then tomorrow we're going to go through the charge phase and the fight phase, which is probably the most in-depth phase. Shooting phase. First thing you need to ask yourself is, what is my primary target? And do I need to shoot one unit before others into said unit? One of the things that a lot of people tend to do is they just start shooting and they don't think about like orders of activations. They just don't consider it. So if you have a unit that can be seen by 2 of yours, an enemy unit that can be seen by 2 of your friendly units, and one of your friendly units can only see one model in the enemy unit, and the other can see the entire unit, well, you want to shoot your friendly unit that can only see one model first, because otherwise, if your friendly model that can see the whole unit activates, your opponent might kill the solo model that your other friendly unit can see, meaning your other friendly unit won't be able to see anything. So you might have to shoot with one of your units before the other ones. And that's important to identify at the start of the shooting phase, is your order of operations. Very, very important. You need to, what I recommend is shooting units that have a single choice of targets first. If you have a unit that can, there's literally only one thing it can shoot, shoot it first, because that is going to decrease the decision load on your brain. Sometimes later in the turn, you'll have to make decisions like, does this unit need to shoot here or shoot here? And this can really be putting a lot of mental load on you. It can make decision paralysis and other issues as well. So if you have some models that are in a position where there's only one target, go and shoot them first. Get it out of the way. Maybe that will give you new information. Maybe they accidentally kill a transport unit, expect the transport to be killed, and a unit gets out that you want to shoot with some of your other guys. Very important. Okay. Then you go, what is the optimal order in which to shoot units or weapons in a unit? We already kind of talked about optimal order. You want to make sure that everyone can maximize their shots. But what is the optimal order of shoot the weapons? Well, if you're shooting into a unit of 3 wound infantry and one of the models has, 1 wound left, maybe you shoot the storm bolter before you start shooting the multi-damage damage guns first, right? Because you want to plink that last one off so that you can maximize your damage. So you don't want to shoot your las cannon at a squad where a model's left on 1. You want to shoot the storm bolter first to try to plink that last one off. All right. Then you ask yourself before shooting, what do you want to grenade? Because grenades is one of the most powerful stratagems in the entire game that I see people forget all the freaking time. If you're trying to kill Be'lakor, you probably want to throw a grenade. But if you shoot and he lives on 1 wound, you're screwed. Now you're going to have to figure out how to do it in the charge phase. So throw the grenades first and then do your shooting. You need to ask yourself, what units need my strats? If I'm playing Chaos Knights and I identify the one Doomstar, or sorry, Death Star that's in the middle of the board that I have to kill, I know that I'm going to need to use my sustained hit strat on that unit. And I'm going to try to get all my brigands in line with that unit. But I don't want to be finding out that I need to use that strat after I've already shot some of my brigands and they won't be able to benefit from it, right? So identify early which units will need your stratagems. If there's a unit that's in cover and they have a 2-up armor save and you know they've got access to armor contempt, if you have something that can remove their cover, like with a stratagem, for example, use it early. Get rid of that cover. Make sure you maximize the damage of all of your units. And then lastly, you're going to declare the units doing actions. In the movement phase is when I position my units to do actions, but you don't declare the action until the end, until the shooting phase. There's no point in declaring the action until you know that you don't need that unit to do anything else. So I have my units positioned and I see all the damage I cause before I declare what's doing the actions. But I always ask myself, was anyone doing an action before I move on to the charge phase? Because you don't want to move on to the charge phase and be like, crap, I forgot to say that guy was doing sabotage. Now, most players will be friendly and be like, of course they're doing sabotage, no problem. But the rules are what they are. And sometimes people can be sticklers and sometimes they actually should be sticklers depending on how things happen on the board. So always ask yourself what's doing the actions. All right, so these were the checklist for the command phase, the movement phase, and the shooting phase. Tomorrow is actually the most complicated ones, and I might need to use like TTS to kind of help me out to describe it a little bit, and I will release that tomorrow to everyone. If you're enjoying this series, let me know down below, because then I can do more things like this, because the goal of the channel here is I'm giving everyone as much free advice as possible to make sure that people become the best Warhammer players in the world, because I want to elevate the level of play that's going on in the game that I love. So I appreciate all of your support. Share it with all of your friends, and be on the lookout for a lot of new stuff coming out pretty dang soon. Tune in tomorrow for the final episode of the Warhammer 40K checklist. So I'll see you then. Happy crapping. Bye-bye.